What's up, everybody? Welcome to the One Fun Guy podcast. Today, my guest is Austin. Austin, tell us a little about yourself and give us a little introduction to what you got going on.
Hey, Marco, thank you so much for having me today. Uh, so my name, as Marco said, I'm Austin Stidham. I'm the founder of Stidham Dynamics. We work with businesses and professionals to develop strategies that they can trust and they can believe in.
Awesome. So let's start from the beginning. You created this kind of unique space in the business world. What made you want to do that?
So the biggest thing, as I looked at what exists in current consulting, coaching, business leadership, all of those realms, I came back to the same point. Almost everybody requires you to substitute their judgment for your own. You bring in a consultant who will tell you, I've seen this problem before. Here's how I fix it. Now go do what I told you to do. And there's some nuance there that's a little bit uncharitable, but as a basic point, when you look at coaching, it's a similar thing. It's somebody who I would like some accountability. I've got a plan for where I want to get to. I need you to help me be accountable, get to that point. The question I came back to is most business owners already understand what their business needs. They understand the vision they have for it, where they'd like the business to go, what they'd like the business to look like. Bringing in somebody from the outside to try to answer those questions for you will always be a less complete experience than finding those answers for yourself. So Stidham Dynamics was built through a series of structured questioning that allows business owners to identify their priorities, what they actually want their business to look like, and then develop a plan and a strategy on how to get there from their goals rather than importing somebody else's.
Okay. Now, when you develop a personal client relationship, are the people that have businesses, are they like new to the business world, or do you find that they've been in it and now it's stagnant and they need a way to adjust or pivot?
That's a great question. I see a mix of both. There are some people who are trying to develop their very first strategies and figure out how to get their business up and off the ground and get going. I worked with one client who had been a photographer for over a decade that was looking at adding a different dimension to the work they were doing and wanted to really flesh out what that would look like, what the assumptions they'd made about what the world was as they were trying to move in that direction, and then come away from it with a built out strategy for how to move forward and add that additional dimension. So I see a mix of both. It's not one or the other.
Sure. Now, when you start with a client off the bat, they come to you and do they have like kind of an idea of where they want the business to go and they don't know how to get there? Or do they want your input on like market strategies and obviously technology development and things like that that they might just not be aware of?
So one of the huge differentiators in the work that I'm doing right now, when a client comes to me, they've already got an idea, they've got a problem they're trying to solve. One of the ways I like to phrase it is we're going on a treasure hunt. I'm going to help you dig, but I don't get to mark the map. I don't get
Okay.
to tell you this is where we're going to look. This is what we're going to consider. This is the direction I think we should go. As you decide what that direction looks like, I am right there alongside you with a shovel to help you dig through it and figure out where reality lives and where the assumptions live and how to develop a strategy. But it's not going to be on me to bring you those ideas and bring you those answers. It's very reliant on the client's knowledge base and their experience in their business and helping them through that.
Okay. Now, a lot of businesses now are hurting because the financial structure of, our current climate of what we're in. And people have the common denominator of, I don't have the business that I once had, right? I had, X amount of employees. I made this amount of product. I sold this amount. Now I don't have those numbers. Are they trying to revamp where they once were, or are they trying to kind of figure out a way to get to that next level through trying times? Because, a lot of businesses, when the market's bad, boom. And then there's a lot of businesses, when the market's bad, they tank.
Yeah, no, I think that's a wonderful question. I think one of the key pieces to business and business strategy as a whole is constantly evaluating what the market's doing, what your business is doing, and where the market has moved. I've seen a lot of businesses where the market has pivoted. At one point, the business was wildly successful. They had a lot going for it. The model that got them to where they were doesn't really fit in the current environment anymore, at least not as well. And that's where, again, I know it's rough out there right now. Everybody's seeing income drop a little bit, there's less disposable income in the marketplace. And so the market share is getting a little bit smaller. But at the same time, I think being willing to step outside of your business for a minute and look at what worked to get us here, and is that still the direction that works in today's environment and in today's marketplace, or to come up with a slightly different strategy if we want to survive and move forward.
Sure. Now, when you started your business doing this with that, what things did you take that were different from other coaches and other people in the same space? Did you find a niche? Did you have a different strategy involvement? Like, how did you kind of morph your ideas away from the rest of the pack, so to say?
So a lot of what I do starts upstream of what a lot of the pack does in this regard. So where I really focus, and this is where it becomes a little bit more philosophical in the way that this is designed. But most people look at strategy and how to build a business and where they're going through the lens of how they see the world currently. So the assumptions you make about what the world is, what the world does, what's possible, what's available to you, shape everything that you do moving forward. How you design your compensation structures, how you decide on your product mix, how you decide on marketing. The problem that we see is more often than not, those are based on assumptions rather than facts. And so it's the way you believe the world works, but do you know that's how the world works? And when you start building your entire strategy off of how you believe the world works rather than on how you know the world works, you see major divergence in what's possible and how you get from point A to point B. So most consultants and coaches will come in once you've already committed to a path, decided on a path, and now it's okay, let's focus on implementation and let's focus on how we get you the last mile here and get you across the line. You already know where you're going. Where I work is much earlier in that process, in asking the questions of, okay, how do you know that's the path? And that's great. I love the direction you're going, but what assumptions are baked into that, and what reality is waiting to bite you potentially if we don't uncover it early in the process?
Okay. Now, do you find that most clients are open-minded to that, or do they have kind of like an idea of where they want to be and they stick to it? And if you offer suggestions, they're like, listen, that's not going to work, and I know it's not going to work, or are they kind of, you have kind of a platform and they say, okay, I like where this is going. Do you have a conversation how that works, or how does that start?
So what's interesting, so the way that I work with clients is we all start at the same place. Um, and this is a little bit of background. I apologize to your audience if this is a little bit boring for a second,
No, no,
but
no. Good. Go ahead.
Stick with me because
Yeah.
we're going to start with Ptolemy and the whole concept of a geocentric universe. The Earth is at the center of the universe. Everything rotates around it. As the astronomers of the time, some of the brightest minds of the time, look up at the sky, they see that every now and then the planets start moving backwards across the sky. That makes zero sense. If everything is orbiting the Earth, it should all stay in a constant line. So they develop what they call epicycles. What that means is on the orbit that the planet is making, each of those planets is making smaller orbits as it goes around that ring. And that explains the backwards motion. It explains everything. Over time, this becomes more and more and more complex. But what's fascinating to me about it is it worked. They were able to accurately predict the movement of the celestial bodies. They were able to navigate with it. They were able to understand how the skies worked. It took Copernicus and Galileo coming to then posit a different theory. Rather than the sun or the Earth being at the center, the sun was at the center of the universe. And all of a sudden, all of the complexity that had been built on top of what they were doing vanished almost overnight. And then finally, we have Kepler, who introduced elliptical orbits, and now everything just fell into line. And we have the universe as we know it today.
Mm-hmm.
It's just simple. It makes sense. The same thing happens inside of businesses constantly. Rather than taking evidence that shows that what we believe or what we think we believe isn't how it's actually working, we build complexity on top of it to justify that evidence and say, see, now it all still works. It all still holds together. Mm-hmm. And when the next crack forms, we build more evidence. When the next crack forms, we just add more complexity, more evidence. And before you know it, you're operating in this realm that's highly complex. It's accurate. It's working for you. It's getting you where you're trying to go. But it's super complex. It's almost impossible to explain to somebody. And if you can shift the center of what you're looking at, you might find a much simpler solution that gets you the exact same thing. And so when I look at businesses and when I work with people, where I always start is with that story, because what I take away from that is the smartest minds of the time, using the best tools they had available, still didn't get it right. And so recognizing that the path you're on is not the correct path, or that you need to shift that center of focus to somewhere else, is not an admission of failure. And it doesn't mean that you were unintelligent. It just means that using the best tools you had, that was the best explanation you had at the time.
Right.
Um, and then what I love, and this is where every session starts after that anecdote, is if you had zero constraints, you wake up tomorrow morning, you have unlimited time, you have unlimited money, you have unlimited energy, attention, whatever you need, what is the business you would build? What is your solution to this question that you've brought? And so we always start by designing from the ideal, where most business strategy always starts with, okay, here's the business you've built so far. Now, how do we make it go to the next step? How do we take it to the next level? This starts at a very different place. It's, let's say we scrapped everything tomorrow and you were starting from scratch. What would the perfect version of this look like for you? And how would you build it if you could do anything you wanted to? Which I found is a very interesting place. That's how I always developed strategy in the past when I was working. I spent over a decade working on compensation structures, compliance structures, and I tried my best to never start from, okay, here's all of the baggage I've got that I've got to now try and work through.
Sure.
And instead, here is what I'd like this to accomplish by the time it's done. Now let's see how close I can get to that version of it.
Okay. So as you develop these, do you find most of your clients are in a position where they find their business is struggling and they need to get to that next hump? Or do you find that most of your clients have a already structured business that it's doing well, but they want to get to that next level? Are you finding people coming to you in their kind of bad times, or in their good times, but could be better times?
I think it's always a mix. One of the things that I've seen is so many people build a business that's working really well, and that becomes the biggest trap in their life. It's no longer the business that they thought they were going to build. It's no longer what they wanted to do when they set out.
Okay.
But at the same time, it's, I'm making good money. Life is comfortable. Why rock the boat? Yeah, I'm not thrilled with the direction it's gone, but it's working. So up until now, I think it's people who are considering a big change in their business, whether or not they're already happy with where the business is and just want to see a little bit more. So like the photographer I mentioned is running a very successful business. She's happy in what she's doing, but there is this additional dimension she wanted to consider bringing into the business and then work through what that would look like. So realistically, I think it's a healthy mix. I don't see a strong proclivity one way or the other. But really, it just works towards making consequential decisions with confidence.
Okay. So can I ask kind of a controversial question?
Of course.
Do you find that people who start a business on their own from zero and work their way to make it successful find it to have a little bit easier point than people who inherit a business and might not know like how to take it? You know, they didn't really work at anything. It was just kind of handed to them and they just kind of took over. Where do you think the like stronger asset is?
You know, that's a fair question. I think they both have different strengths and weaknesses. I think that somebody who built a business from scratch, from the ground up, they know all of the ins and outs, they know all of the mechanics, and they also understand what it took to get from A to B. So they've got a little bit more appreciation for the effort that created the business that they have. Where I think somebody who steps into a role, whether that's through hiring, inheritance, whatever that looks like, they have an opportunity to bring outside perspective. Again, like I was talking about earlier, we become so fixated on what we believe reality to be that we're often hesitant to consider outside explanations and outside perspectives and outside ideas. Where I could see some strength in somebody coming into a role is they bring a new perspective. They might come up with ideas that the original founder of the business had never even considered, or had considered and written off as that's not possible, that won't work. But with a fresh set of eyes, you might be able to find, you know what, there actually is a way to make this function, and there is a way to get across that line.
Okay. Because it's just one of those things where it's like I've had people that started businesses and you can tell their passion for their movingness and their, willingness to adapt and change kind of is they understand it versus somebody who inherits a company might not know like what the foundation of the company actually was built on and the hard work it took. They were just handed whether it's a small business or a multi-million dollar business, they might not know. And then it gets to the point where the people underneath them, right? They're obviously saying, well, this person didn't work here. I've been here for 40 years. I know everything. And all of a sudden they just walk in the door at 22 years old and they're handed a multi-million dollar company. And then that's usually kind of like, I was just kind of trying to get your perspective on the people that like start from the ground up versus the people who walk in. And I see both sides of it, but I think that it's, a little bit more difficult for somebody that struggles when they built it from the ground up because they understood the highs and now they're facing the lows versus somebody who might not have ever known the lows. All they knew was money.
Yeah. No, and I think one of the things you brought up there that I think is a great point, and the more important point than whether or not you built it or inherited it, is the passion and the understanding. You could be an owner who built your business, burnt out on it 5 years ago, and is still trying to run it. The passion's gone. And I'd say you might arguably be a worse owner than a brand new person who comes in, is passionate about it, took the time to research, took the time to understand, and took the time to really get what the business is. So I think rather than asking, did you build it or did you inherit it? The real question is, are you still passionate about it? Do you still love doing the work? And are you willing to put in the effort to understand it?
Sure. So yeah, that's a good point. So now, you mentioned earlier about the kind of certainties that are involved with what you do and like expectations versus reality. What are some of the things that people that you've seen kind of misunderstand about their business? They might have a false sense of what reality is and how do you get them to focus on something that might not be possible for them to reach? Are they understanding? Do you kind of lay down the message? Are you more stern? Like, how do you relay what you're trying to do to somebody who might not understand what you're trying to do?
So there's a lot of scientific research on how human beings make decisions and then commit to decisions. And one of the best ways to help somebody make a decision and commit to it is if they come to the realization on their own. Having an external party tell you this is what you need to do or this is where you need to look meets resistance more often than not. And think about a traditional consultant, for instance. Let's say I came in and I told you, Marco, this is what you're going to do with your business. If you do this, it will succeed. Now go implement. What's going to happen the first time you hit a road bump in that plan that I gave you?
You're going to question the advice that you were
Yeah.
given, right?
You're likely to say, Austin had no idea what he was talking about. Clearly, this isn't working. Now, let's say that you developed that strategy and you understood why each decision was made, why that was the direction you wanted to go, why you believe in it. What happens when you hit a road bump then?
You kind of either pivot and move forward, or you ask somebody, say, hey, listen, I tried something, give me a different perspective, right? Think
Exactly. You
tanks.
evaluate and you take the evidence in and you can pivot. You can decide, this wasn't the right direction to begin with, but I understand the reasoning. I understand what I was trying to accomplish. So let me try something different. Or you can take it on the chin and you can say, adversity is part of life. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going down this road. Eventually it might work. And so rather than trying to force somebody to accept that my advice is correct, the goal is to help them come to their own conclusions about what they believe. So it relies heavily on the Socratic method. And Socrates was famous for just asking his students questions and allowing his students to then answer the questions. So I don't know, are you familiar with the Rumsfeld matrix?
Not off the top of my head.
All right. In it's Donald Rumsfeld. It came from a prior concept, but he was the one that popularized it, talking about the war going on over in Iraq at the time. And he talked about you've got three quadrants. You've got your known knowns, and this is the stuff that you know. You've got known unknowns, which are the things that you know that you still need to figure out and you still need to learn. And then the scariest quadrant that he talks about is the unknown unknowns. So it's the things that you don't even know that you should know, but you don't know yet. And it was used for years in business strategy. It's a great tool, but one of the things I looked at is there's a major flaw in that tool. And so I developed a process I call the dark Rumsfeld. because the problem with the Rumsfeld matrix is it assumes that you are able to locate yourself correctly inside of the matrix. So when you file a known, you know for a fact that that is a fact. That's an assumption that the Rumsfeld matrix makes.
Okay.
So I developed what I refer to as the false known. So what is something that you believe beyond a shadow of a doubt that may not be accurate and may not be reality? And so when I'm working with a client, we populate that entire box. So it's, okay, so now you've just designed your ideal strategy and you've designed exactly what the business would look like if you had every opportunity available to you. Why do you believe that is the right direction in the market? Why do you believe it might not work? What is everything you believe that impacts whether or not you could implement that process? And so then they take a little bit of time, they work in a notebook, they write down all of the things that feed into that decision. Because obviously, if you believe there were no constraints and there was nothing that made that impossible, you'd already be doing it. Mm-hmm. So clearly there's something you believe isn't possible in that strategy. And then we take each of those and we run it through 4 simple questions. How do you know it's true? How much do you trust the source of that information? When was the last time you checked? And how likely is it to have changed since the last time you checked? So for instance, let's say that I tell you, you know what, Marco, I know that cows make milk. And you ask me, okay, how do you know that? When I was 8 years old, I went to a dairy farm, I milked a cow. I saw the milk come out of the cow. Cows make milk. And what's funny is no matter how straightforward it seems, we still run all 4 questions on every single point.
Sure.
Okay, how much do you trust that source? Well, I'm the one who did it. I was standing there, so I trust it pretty much. When was the last time you evaluated? Well, I was 8 years old. I'm 36 now, so it's been a little bit. But then that final question, how likely is it to have changed since the last time I evaluated it? I don't think it's very likely. So I can treat cows make milk as a fact that I know. That stays safe in the known box.
Sure.
And so by running things through this set of interrogatory questions, you're able to really ask yourself, how much do I trust what I'm treating as a fact? So let's say I told you, I'm launching a new product, or there's a product I've always wanted to launch, but no customer is going to buy it. And you ask me, okay, how do you know that? Well, I tried launching a similar project 7 years ago and couldn't find a market for it. All right, how much do you trust that source? I lived it, right. I trust it. When was the last time you checked? It was now 7 years ago. And how likely is it to have changed since you last checked? There's actually a good chance the market might be more open to that concept today than it was years ago. So I've treated this as a fact off of a single evidence point 7 years in my past. And now I start to realize, you know what? Maybe that's not still the case. Maybe there's still room to test this out and try to go this direction.
All right. So let me ask this then. You implement all these things and you say in a perfect world, if money and time and energy and effort wasn't an option, you can get to this. What are the roadblocks that stop somebody from getting to that point, right? Because obviously money's a real thing, time is a real thing, energy is a real thing. So what would be some kind of setbacks they would have?
No, that's a great question. So the reason I start with the ideal is not because those constraints are imagined or fake.
Right.
It's because we can't trust all of those constraints to be accurate. So as we work through that dark Rumsfeld, some of those constraints, some of the things they listed as this is why it won't work, they're going to realize that's accurate. That's true. I can't do that right now.
Right.
And so this is in no way looking at, write down all of your dreams and just go achieve them. Everything's possible. Go do it all.
Sure.
But it starts from the point of asking, if you could do anything, what would it be? And then let's look at what stops you from being able to do that. And let's honestly evaluate and the constraints that survive. So again, let's say it's, I want to launch a record label, but it's going to cost me $5 million to do it. And I've only got $100,000 right now. All right, that's a legitimate constraint that is going to survive as we work through the matrix. There's no way I can ask you good enough questions to get you the rest of the money. But what I found with starting with the ideal and then working into your strategy afterwards, maybe you start looking at, okay, I don't have $5 million, but if I pool 10 buddies and we all put money in, and then we could get a loan from this person to cover the rest, there might still be a pathway that exists inside of there
Sure.
that you never would have considered if, when we start the process, it's just, well, I don't have $5 million, so I can't start a record label, so that's not even worth considering. Let's move on. So I think you're spot on. There are legitimate constraints that will always survive this process. And that's where, after we finish the entire Dark Rumsfeld and we work through each of the quadrants, and I won't bore you with what happens in every quadrant here,
Sure.
but we move into developing the actual strategy. And where the actual strategy lives is, okay, so now let's take your ideal, let's take every constraint that survived, and let's build a strategy that gets you as close as you can get to that ideal while still respecting those constraints.
Okay. Now, if you get to all of those points and they answer all of those questions and they start to launch and they implement all of these things, what in your experience has been like the success versus failure rate? Have most of the people succeeded once they've gone through you and have gotten to the point where they want to get and then kind of ask you for more ideas? Or is it just something that is just so far-fetched that even you are like, I understand what you're trying to do, but you just don't have the means to get there?
So I'm still fairly early in the process, so the sample pool is a little bit small at the moment.
Sure.
But I found that traditionally the goal of what I'm doing is not to give you a strategy that is evergreen, that's going to last you forever. Part of this is also teaching you how to interrogate your belief system and your strategy so that you're
Mhm.
more self-sufficient and you can develop better strategy into the future. What
Sure.
I do is a huge mark of success. If you ever have to call me to develop another strategy again because you've learned the tools and you're confident enough that you can do it, that still is a win in my book.
Right.
So I'm not looking at, every time you try to change something, make sure you call me again and we'll do this whole thing again.
Sure.
Hopefully by the time I've left, you've got a different way of viewing how you develop and design strategy. And you're
Mhm.
confident enough. You might still, if there's a major consequential decision and you want an outside facilitator who will help hold you accountable. Because one of the things that I find is when you're answering questions for yourself that challenge your own belief system, you tend to be a little bit more generous with yourself and your answers
Right.
than you are when you have to articulate it to a third party.
Sure.
Um, and so I think there's help in having the third party there. But so far, again, the photographer client that I talked about is on track to launch what she was trying to get done. Uh, when you come out of a session, you've got a roadmap as well as immediate next steps, what you're going to do next to
Mhm.
get from A to B. And she's on track. Her goal was by the end of September, beginning of October, to be able to launch this facet of her business. And so far, through our follow up, she's on track to make that deadline.
Okay.
And so the goal would be little additional intervention needed by the time you leave a session. You're confident in the direction you're going, you're confident in the strategy you built, and you're excited to hit the ground running.
Okay. Now, do you also kind of, when you are doing these consulting things, do you kind of explain that there might be some failures that you're going to have to learn from and that everything might not be perfect? Like these are just ideas and suggestions. They're not absolutes. So do you kind of explain that like if you try something, you fail, like keep going? Or like how do you explain to a client that like everything I'm saying isn't the absolute truth, right? They're just guides. Do they understand that? Do they realize that things might not work or one aspect of this might fail, but like you've kind of implemented where there's more than just one or two ideas, that it's a whole structure? Do they understand that?
Yeah. So one of the things is we're working through that dark Rumsfeld. I mentioned that on the traditional Rumsfeld, you've got unknown unknowns. And it's stuff you don't even know that you don't know. The question that we ask on the dark Rumsfeld, because again, I can't populate that, because if we could populate it, all of a sudden it's no longer unknown because we
Right.
know about it. But the question becomes, okay, let's pretend you execute the strategy that you've built and the design you have perfectly. You do everything exactly right. How could this fail anyways? Where does this still fail? And so there are factors that will always be outside of your control. You
Mhm.
could, and again, nobody is going to execute their strategy 100% perfectly because we're humans, we're not machines.
Right.
And so, but assuming you did everything perfect, that doesn't mean that the market's ready for what you're offering. It doesn't mean that your price point's correct yet. It doesn't mean that And so all of these things are brought into that process early, where this is not a guarantee that you've now built a strategy and now you're going to go out and achieve everything. There are
Okay.
external factors that may prevent you from getting there. But when those factors show up, you understand why you're going the direction you're going, what you're trying to accomplish, why the strategy was designed how it's designed, which then gives you the ability to reevaluate on your own and make decisions about what parts of this strategy survive, where could I pivot this, what's something different I could try, which is just something that with a traditional external strategy consultant trying to give you a plan, you'll never be able to do, because you don't understand everything that went into that design of the plan. You just got handed the final product.
Okay. Now, from your standpoint, obviously you've been around business for a long time. You've done a bunch of stuff. When somebody comes in and they're considered a guru in the field, right? Like they're the upper echelon of people that do this. When you take stuff that they've said or done and try to implement it, do you kind of feel that their guide is worth it? Or do you feel strongly that like they've done things which are good, but I can do it better? Like, how do you navigate that realm of it?
I think there's an interesting mix. I'm always very skeptical of gurus, motivational speakers, things of that nature, because they experienced one way to get to the end goal and to get to success. And as human beings, we are excellent at assigning meaning to things and looking for patterns and looking for structure and saying, okay, well, I did this, and so this must be what that means. Again, it's lighthearted, but you see it all the time on TV shows with people in their favorite football team with their lucky jersey that I was wearing
Mhm.
this when they happen to win this game. And so now every time they play, I've got to put this jersey on because that's how
Right.
this works. And I think humans were very good at doing that. Where I get wary of a lot of gurus, motivational, they operate from a sense of, I have solved how to make this happen. And there
Mhm.
are some realms where that might be completely accurate. So, for instance, if you're an accountant and you've figured out how to run books well, there aren't a lot of unique ways you can run the books and still be legal. And so they have solved
Sure.
how to run books well. And that's great. But when it comes to, I have found exactly how to build business no matter what, or I've found how to grow anything. That's where I start getting skeptical, because it's, you found a way that works for you with your resource set, with your skill set, with your knowledge base, that doesn't necessarily translate to universal application, where, all right, so all you have to do is follow my 3-step program and you're going to be successful beyond your wildest dreams. And that's where this was designed to be much more individualized and much more in tune with, do you envision and what do you want to achieve? And so I always take skeptics. I always take gurus with a huge grain of salt. There are some great ones out there. I'm not
Mhm.
the entire industry or saying all gurus are useless.
Right.
But I think it's important, whether they're a guru, whether they're an intern, no matter who it is, to listen to what they're saying and then think through it critically and see, okay, where does the evidence support it? Where does the evidence refute it? Does that sound like something I'm willing to try? And I think blindly following any of that advice is a huge risk for anybody, no matter where that advice comes from.
Okay. Because the thing is that like where I was getting with this is like somebody who's an actual consultant that understands what a baseline is versus somebody who's a motivator. They're two totally different things, right? Because
Yeah.
a consultant can motivate you, but a motivator can't consult you, right?
Yeah.
So in your experience, have you found that like the people that actually like have a good baseline in what they're trying to do are also good motivators, or are they not? And they're just strictly to a business structure. How do you kind of find the balance of both? Do you use motivation? Do you use just strictly consulting? Like, what do you do personally?
That's a great question. So for me, I don't even view what I do as consulting at this
Okay.
point, because I'm not giving you answers. A consultant is somebody who I see as, I have paid you to come in, look at the business, synthesize all of the information I give you, and then give
Hmm.
me a direction
Sure.
and tell me where to go. Everything I do is almost the antithesis of that. It's, I'm going to come in, you've already got a direction you're considering. Now let's stress test it. Let's run it through what's real, what isn't, what survives, what dies. And by the time you leave, you've now gone from, I have this cool idea for what I'd like to build, to, okay, I have a strategy that I'm going to implement here. And maybe that strategy doesn't work perfectly.
Okay.
but I've got a strategy that I'm going to implement to try to bring that into reality and bring that to fruition. And it still might fail, it still might not work, but at least you've got an understanding of where you're going. Um, I think what's interesting is even as you bring in a consultant, really the advice and the guidance that you're getting just by nature of what consulting
Hmm.
is pattern matching based off of what the consultant has seen prior.
Okay.
I've seen 50 businesses that all look similar to yours. This is what we do in this situation. There's not as much flexibility for here are the unique factors that I want to bring in that you're passionate about, that you're driven by, and let's implement some of those. Um, so that's where I look at traditional consulting definitely has its place. Don't get me wrong. I'm not
Correct.
saying abandon it entirely.
Right.
It solves a different problem than what I'm trying to solve.
Okay. So as you're growing your business and doing this stuff, what are some things that you've done personally that you've seen that you need to adjust and how you have these ideas in kind of terms and the path that you want to put people on? What are some things that you look at like personally to help a client?
Yeah, that's a great question. As I run sessions, I'm constantly finding things to refine and tweak and improve. One of the things I found early on is some of the questions were a little bit more ambiguous than I would have liked them to be,
Okay.
which led to responses that were still valid responses based on the question I asked, but were not the responses I was looking to get to. So, for instance, when talking to somebody about, what are the reasons this might not work, or what are the reasons this is impossible? Early on, what I found was I got a lot of emotional self doubt style responses,
Hmm.
which are all valid. That's all great. So, I'm worried nobody will want to buy from me, or I don't feel like I'm skilled enough to do this. Uh, but what that originally was designed to try to interrogate are what are the external factors that might impact the ability for
Okay.
this to work. And we can deal with the internal factors later. That happens later in the process. But to begin with, what are the external factors? So I find refining the language looks like so that I'm asking the questions in a precise
Okay.
enough way that they understand what I'm trying to
Right.
ask is beneficial. But outside of that, again, this entire process has been very research heavy. I'm constantly reading new literature about how the brain works, how decisions get made, what strategy looks like, and looking for ways to implement how do I get somebody from I have this great idea that I'd like to do to I built a strategy for how to do it by myself
Right.
through these structured questions.
Sure. So now that you've built the strategy, let's kind of shift into another topic of marketing yourself, right? How do you get yourself out there? Like, how do people find you? Obviously, social media is a huge platform, right? But what are the other steps that you've taken personally to like say, hey, I'm here, use me?
Yeah, social media is a huge one. This is actually the funniest part of business to me because it's the part I'm the least comfortable with. I
Okay.
spent 13 years happily working behind the scenes on spreadsheets and documents and
Mhm.
things like that, rarely poking my head up unless I absolutely had to. And so it's been a wild trip. All of a sudden, having to figure out, okay, how do I create a brand around this? How do I market? How do I get myself out there? So social media is a huge one. Also, working through warm referrals, people that I've done sessions for, people that I've met out in the wild,
Mhm.
um, going to events. Chamber of Commerce has actually been a huge one for me. I
Sure.
honestly had never even considered looking into a chamber of commerce
Yeah.
before I started this, but I've made some great connections there, met some great people and some great friends. And so it's been an interesting ride. It's definitely so far outside of my wheelhouse. I would
Right.
be more than happy to spend my entire career just sitting behind
Yeah.
developing theory and helping people move forward without ever having to post a reel on social media.
Correct. Right.
Unfortunately, that's not the world we live in today. And
I
so I've
know.
had to quickly acclimate and slowly but surely getting better in that realm. Still not a master by any means.
Okay. So as you start to kind of create this idea for yourself and you kind of built it up, what were like some things that you found personally that were like you didn't think were going to be things that were necessary, but you found were absolute necessaries as you create a business? Can you kind of walk us through some things that you might have kind of overthought, or was even a forethought at the point and you're like, oh, I really need to do this before I do this? Can you kind of walk us through like creating a business from the ground up?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, and I, I think I can share more from the things I did wrong than I can from the
Right.
things
We
I
all
did
can,
right.
right?
I've learned more from those. But again, I went through multiple iterations of what this would look like before it landed on where it is today. The problem is I spent months of effort on those bad iterations.
Correct.
Um, Not that they were bad, they had their own purpose and they did their own thing. But I think the biggest key and the biggest difference maker for me would have been if I could have become abundantly clear early in the process. It would have wasted a little bit less time.
Hmm.
Where I think that gets complicated, though, is all of this evolved throughout the process. So it's not like, I started selling door-to-door pest control and now I'm doing this. It's not a
Correct.
wild transformation.
Sure.
It's an evolution throughout that process.
Right.
And the other thing that, again, I fall victim to this all the time because of my nature of being behind the scenes a little bit
Hmm.
more, but building in public and forcing your ideas to interact with reality in the marketplace before you feel like you're ready to is where I have learned more in this process than I ever could have with another 6 months of
Right.
theorizing and cogitating and trying to design. And so the biggest thing that I've found useful is as I've got ideas, try to move them into the public sphere as quickly as possible to see what resonates, what doesn't, what gets pushed back, what works, what fails. Um, because I'm not going to lie, there have been some ideas I've had that in my mind, they made 100% sense. This was going to
Sure.
be perfect. Everybody was going to love it. And
Right.
then it hits reality and it doesn't resonate with anybody and nobody gets it. And it's like, man, I just spent like a month and a half building something that nobody else gets. It's
Right.
cool to me, but that's not super helpful in the long run.
Sure. Now, as you start doing this social media thing, right? Like, you're on Instagram and you're putting yourself out there and you're doing stuff. What's the feedback been like? Have people kind of been genuinely interested? Do you like in the comments, are people dropping? Do they like what you're saying? Do they like what's your personal experience with social media been since you're out there now and you're putting yourself out there? Because it's a big risk, right? It's a big leap. And people that watch this don't understand what it really takes behind the scenes to what it actually takes to make a 30-second clip to put on social media. There is a process that goes into that, and most people don't understand that. What's your feedback been like?
Yeah, no, again, feedback is there have been a few that have been very positive and a lot of early social media game is releasing stuff into silence. And it's
Mhm.
such a nightmare because there's no validation loop, there's no
Right.
feedback. You're watching the view counts, but the view counts don't really tell you anything
Sure.
because you don't know if they watched it because they liked it, they watched it because they forgot to scroll. Who knows what played into that? The one that I've actually found to be the most interesting platform to use is Threads, believe it or
Mhm.
not, which up until a week and a half ago, I had never used it in my life.
Okay.
But I found more genuine conversation there and more people willing to engage and go back and forth on ideas and weigh in
Okay.
on concepts. And so that's been really nice. When it comes to Instagram, Facebook, I'm still finding my footing a little bit.
Okay.
Every now and then I'll have something that pops off a little bit more and gets a little bit more feedback, a little bit more of that loop going. But I think the biggest thing is just you see these accounts that take off super quickly. And a lot of them rely on very gimmicky things.
Mhm.
They're just trying to chase views and followers for the sake of views and followers. Trying to build something that challenges worldview and is a little bit more philosophical, a little bit more business oriented, has a smaller built-in audience, but I feel like as it scales, it will be a more reliable audience and it'll be a more meaningful audience is the hope at least.
Right.
And so I think that's the biggest thing starting in social media is just realizing it's a lot of consistency. It's a lot of hard work. It's a slow game in the early days.
It sure is.
As you start to grow, some of that growth will start to compound for you and it'll speed up a little bit. But especially those early days, it's a little bit disheartening from times. Again, I'm sure you've experienced this where you'll put 40 minutes to an hour into making something that you feel super good about and that you're so excited to release out there.
Yeah.
And then you get like 3 views and it's like, well, that was fun.
And you know what, to be honest with you, I've stopped doing that now. My podcast now is going on its third year. And my first year and a half, all I looked at was the views, how many people commented, how many people shared, how many people liked. And when I realized that I was more involved in that, I said, I'm going to stop looking at that and I'm going to put out the best product that I possibly can. And whatever happens, happens, because the things that you think are perfect aren't perfect. And it's always the views where things go wrong, or you have somebody that like has something happen to them where it gets the most popularity. So I don't look at algorithms anymore. I don't follow any of that stuff. And I probably should, but I just don't, because at the end of the day, what I put out is on me, and it's my product and it's what I've done. And so all I want to do is make the podcast the best that they can and kind of get the most out of them. And it's not, at the end of the day, it's not really about me, it's about my guests. So this episode is about you, right? I want people to get a better understanding of what you're trying to do and get a better understanding of what you're putting out in the world. So when I share it with everybody, if somebody says, hey, listen, I know somebody who's got a business that could really use you, that's what I use it for. So me, it's not, it has no bearing on me whatsoever. I'm just the face that asks the questions. But my ultimate goal is to make you get to where you need to be. And if I could use my platform to do that. So, that's how I find my guests. Like, I try to have people that have, something that they can put into the world to make it a little bit better for somebody else. So for what I do, it kind of has no bearing. So I don't really look at that stuff anymore, to be honest with you. I just don't. It doesn't affect me in any way.
That's fair, and that's probably a much healthier and happier way to look
It
at
is.
it.
It's very, yes. And whatever happens, happens, right? So like, I do podcasts, but I also do the concert recordings and things like that. I just want to give people kind of a glimpse into what I do and kind of use my platform if they can't experience those things, right? So I'm very fortunate enough that I have a good living where I can afford to go to concerts and buy the tickets versus somebody who can't do that, right? So at least they can see it through my eyes, right?
Yeah.
So that's the only reason why I do it, is to bring happiness to somebody else that might not have gone able to, or not have wanted to been there but couldn't do it. So I just use my platform to bring a little bit of happiness to maybe somebody that said, I would have loved to have been there, but I just couldn't do it. Well, you can at least see what I saw. Right.
Yeah.
From my point of view, where I was sitting, where I got to experience it at, right? Because sometimes I get the nosebleeds because it's all I could afford. Sometimes I get front row, right? So it just depends. But you kind of see it through my scope. And that's what I do it for. It's not for, personal gratification. It's just I'm there already. So I'm already happy that I get to see it firsthand. But I just try to put it out for somebody who might not have been there. So that's where I think that, like, my podcast, I want to use it as a platform to help people and to help people grow and to experience the things that they might not get to do through me. Just like when I watch YouTube videos on somebody else, right? Like, I live vicariously through somebody that makes, $100,000 a month doing YouTube videos because they vlog the entire day. So I find interest in that. And they're, doing collaborations and business things as well. So that's where I get my motivation from. So when I take my notes in my journal and I say, okay, I want to start vlogging more, I want to give people a better glimpse, I want to give, let people in a little bit more. There's a genuine risk to that, right? Just like you said, you have to get comfortable doing that, right? To let people in. And so I'm that way now, where it's like I will take somebody on an adventure with me. So going to a concert, going to a show, going to do stuff that I like to do, I just am lucky enough I have a platform to do it. So that's kind of where my mindset is now. And I find it to be much more easier. And I think you will too down the road, right? Because you put yourself out there to a certain extent, but at the same point, like, you have a business to run as well. So is your business going to be content creation and social media, or is your business going to be helping people that want to structure their business to be successful, right? Because your
Yeah.
success runs on their success, not on yours.
Exactly. And I mean, that's the huge thing that I've had to really accept and realize. The content creation becomes a vehicle for finding people to help. You have to be incredibly careful to not let it become the entire business, because it will eat up
Sure.
all of your time if you're not
And
paying
it will,
attention
right?
to it.
And that's exactly it. And like, like you just said, you have to make, the life balance, right? Because you have to put yourself out there so people see you. So you have to spend time creating content. But at the same time, you're running a business and you're trying to help people grow theirs and expand theirs and succeed in theirs. So it's a very weird balance because if you find yourself not putting stuff out on social media and people are like, listen, you put a video out every day and now you put one a week, now you put one a month, what are you doing? Well, the reality is you're helping other people. You have a real physical business that you're running. It's not social media. But then people that are used to seeing your little anecdotes and stuff like that, they're like, where are you? Like, what happened?
Right.
Why aren't you here anymore? Right. So it's
Right.
a
Now,
very weird thing.
that's probably the biggest thing that is the next refinement I'm making is figuring out how to batch my content early so I can spend one day making a week's worth of content, schedule
Sure.
it all out, and then I can not have to be on social media every single
Right.
day trying to promote and trying to be out there.
Yeah. And the thing is that like you'll understand as you start meeting clients, the social media aspect now becomes fun because you could say, listen, I'm on my way to meet this person and we're going to talk about this because people are genuinely interested in what you do, right? And that's the weird thing to me is like, I didn't think anybody was interested in what I do day to day, right? But people are like, well, let's see you on your way to the show. Like, let's see you on your way to the concert. Let's see. So that stuff has been the most kind of fun thing to do is to kind of bring people along on the journey with you because they want to see it through your eyes. So as you start growing, social media is just going to become a natural progression of what you're doing. As you're meeting clients, as you're going to the drawing board, even if the client is willing to have you talk to them and like film it so that you can actually see what a session is like and what you actually talk about and what your think tanks are like, that's what grows your audience on social media. So it's something mundane is, hey, can I put the camera on for 5 minutes while we talk about what we're going to go over? And the person says, yeah, go ahead. That's going to be your biggest asset because you're relaying now a real message, right? People can see what you're actually doing in those meetings because most time it's just behind closed doors, right?
Yeah.
People are like, I don't want to, we want to go over this topic, privately, but some people are willing to say, yeah, well, we'll talk about it, right? We'll come on in. Let's see if we can help somebody else. That's kind of where your
Yeah.
growth is going to be, right? So it's a unique thing when you start getting real feedback and people are like, when you ask them what do you want to see, people will tell you flat out what they want to see, right? We want to see more of this, we want to see less of this. And so obviously I'm a podcaster, not a vlogger, but I've kind of become more of a vlogger now as I grow my podcast because people are like, well, if you're going to go to a concert, let's see what happens from the time you're standing in line to the time you actually get in till the band starts playing. So now I do a lot of the sound check stuff. I'll go live just as a whim as I'm standing there as people are going through the door because people are like, they want to see what it's like. What's the venue like? Where are you at? What are you doing? So
Very cool.
it's a kind of a real weird concept about it, but like you'll adapt and you'll see as you get into this thing more and more. And I loved the clip the other day, like when you were talking about Aldi's, right? Like that's like a very insightful thing. And if people don't do it, I'll show the clip at the end of this video when I put it on YouTube. But it was so great because like you explained why all these prices are the way they are, right? And you kind of walk through somebody's that wouldn't have a perspective on not having baggers, not having grocers, not having you do everything yourself.
Yeah. No, and honestly, that's one of my favorite things to explore. And if I had unlimited time, I'd spend so much time just looking at business strategy cases and why choices they do. Um, Again, what I think is fascinating, and this is one of the things that kicked off this entire train of thought and this entire concept for me, is we look at major events that happen. So things like the Enron scandal, things like Wells Fargo, the 2008 housing
Mhm.
collapse. And as people, we look for who is the villain in this story. And it's very easy to find them all the time. So again, the housing collapse, it's greedy bankers, it's
Sure.
all of these things play into this concept. But realistically, having spent over a decade working in incentive systems, both positive and negative, so both compensation, how do you earn more money by doing the right things, and compliance, what happens if you do the wrong things.
Mhm.
The incentive structures determine human behavior so much more than any other factor at play. Most people are not malicious inherently. They're just looking to optimize their incentive structure and their benefit out of incentives. And so as I look at businesses, as I look at events that happen, all of that kind of stuff, the question isn't who made this decision. It's how did the system make this decision look super rational to the person who made it? And I think that's where there's more meaningful opportunity for change. I mean, I'm sure you see this all the time. We see it in business over and over again where we replace the person who was a bad actor. They broke the law. They did something. Again, Enron is a great example.
Hmm.
They go to prison. There was very little done to change the environment that created an Enron. And so really all we're doing is waiting for the next person to figure out how to leverage that environment. And then we get another Enron,
Sure.
another situation just like that. If instead of just focusing on the bad actor, which we totally should, like, I'm
Sure.
not saying let the guy off the hook because the system made him do it. That's ridiculous. He chose to do it. But
Right.
if we then also ask ourselves, how did the system make that happen? We can look at how do we then change the system so that it doesn't happen again.
Hmm.
I think so much of our energy goes into the human causes of things rather than the systemic causes of outcomes. And the human causes are great. They're valuable. They're worth exploring, but they don't prevent the next occurrence.
Right.
And so looking at businesses and understanding how do they make the decisions they make and why are those decisions logical is so much more rewarding to me than just like, oh yeah, Aldi figured out how to be a little bit cheaper. That's good for them.
Right.
It's okay. Again, there was another short that I did on IKEA. That
Hmm.
IKEA literally just outsourced all of the labor of furniture creation to the customer. And it allowed them to flat pack their items so they could ship a lot easier. You could come to the warehouse, you could go home same day with your furniture. Where before, if you were buying a dresser, you'd find it and then it's like, okay, let's schedule delivery 3 to 5 days out. It'll show up at your house because it's all
Yeah.
built, it's ready to go. And so IKEA was able to find ways to compete by changing the model rather than just trying to get more efficient at what everybody else was doing. And that's what I just find fascinating in a lot of these instances. Aldi is the same thing.
Hmm.
Rather than just doing what everybody else was doing, it's okay, how could we shift our model to give our customers what they actually want and what they actually value and get rid of some of the luxuries that they don't care all that much about to give them more of what they really do want. So,
Sure. Now, let me ask this question. I know we're coming up on time, but when somebody has a business model and a business practice and it's worked for so long and they keep improving on it, when do you get to the point where you think that they've outsourced themselves so much where people just are not buying that product anymore, right? So one that comes to mind is Nike, right? Nike shoes have always been expensive. We know they cost $4 to make. They are charging now upwards of 2 to 250 for the new Jordans that are coming out, right? How are they able to leverage that over the cost of time where most people can't afford $250 for shoes, but they're going to sell out of every pair that they make? How
well,
does that, like, so I kind of, from your perspective, right? Like somebody that, doesn't kind of understand business, kind of, if you can put it in the terms for how that they, because obviously we don't know the ins and outs of like a Nike, but products, most people are trying to cut the cost of things to make it more affordable. Yet you have companies that can do what Nike's doing. How are they implementing that, and what are they doing right, in your opinion, versus somebody else who is struggling to try to cut costs and make things cheaper for a consumer?
yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think it's one we see over and over again. When you look at a Nike, the reason they're able to do what they do right now is because they have enough value built in the brand itself. Nike means something to a lot of people. And again, we're seeing more and more of the K-shaped economy where the people that have wealth and income just
Hmm.
keep getting more. The people that are on the bottom end of that, just it gets worse and worse. And so what Nike really appears to be able to tap into is the people that have income view Nike as a status symbol. They view value there. And so they're willing to pay those exorbitant prices, even though we know the markup on them is obscene. Again, it's almost like if you look at Gucci versus a shirt from, say, the Gap or Target or something like that. Is the fabric quality, the craftsmanship, all of that that goes into the Gucci shirt really worth 100 times the value of the other shirt?
Yeah.
No, it never is. But what people feel is buying this brand and wearing this says something about who I am as a person. And I'm the kind of person that wears Nike. Yeah, they're 250. I'm the kind of person who can spend
Sure.
$250 on
Right.
shoes. And so I'm going to do that. Where I think some of the smaller brands start to struggle is if they don't have that brand cachet, then you start to have to really compete on price and trying to say, okay, buy me because I'm affordable and I still look good, versus you buy me because it says something about who you are as a person.
Sure.
And so I think that's really the discrepancy that we see there. And I mean, you saw it even several years back. Nike went through a little bit of a rough patch where their PR struggled a little bit. They found some audiences that resonated really well with them. They found some that didn't appreciate the message they were trying to send. And it affected their bottom line. And they had to course correct to try to become, again, a little bit more of a recognizable household brand that everybody was comfortable with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the major distinguishing factor when it comes to those massive price discrepancies.
Sure.
Yeah.
I only ask about Nike because like Nike is one of those things where not everybody needs gym shoes, right? Like you can't use Apple or Samsung because everybody needs a phone, right? It's as part of
Yeah.
our integrated life. But with Nike, especially, like I only ask because even people that quote unquote can't afford them will save up for a pair of Nikes where somebody might say, well, I don't need a $400 Gucci shirt. I can buy a Hanes for 20 bucks. It's the same
Yeah.
thing. And they have no problem doing that, but they won't buy an Adidas pair of shoes. They want the Nike, they want the Jordans, they want the Airs, and they will do whatever they can to get them. It's like the one product out there that no matter what they'll charge, people at every level will still try to obtain it even though they're not obtainable. But if you said, listen, there's a Gucci and an Armani shirt, they're 450 bucks, or there's a black and white Hanes shirt at 20 bucks, you would say just give me the $20 shirt, right? Most people
Yeah.
would, it's a no-brainer, right? Unless you love Armani or Gucci, it's a different story. But with Nike, that's the one era where it doesn't matter. Rich or poor people want the shoes, and it's for them, it's kind of like a weird thing. And I just wanted to get like kind of your thoughts on it because I know you kind of look at, recognition, and you mentioned it before type of thing, but it's the one company that I could think of off the top of my head that people will do whatever they can to get it, even if it's not obtainable. They'll try to do that.
And this is purely speculation on my part, so don't take this as gospel
Sure.
at all. But I think part of what you're tapping into there is the fact that from a cultural perspective, even in lower income communities, wearing a pair of Jordans says something about who you are as a person. That is a desirable,
Mm-hmm.
high level thing. And so I think the culture built around the product also contributes to that, where, again, nobody in a lower income community is thinking, I've got to get a new Gucci shirt. All of my friends are going to think I'm so cool if I've got a Gucci
Right.
shirt, to your point. Where with the Jordans specifically, and Nike as a brand as a whole, they've built this cultural mystique around themselves that if I wear these, people are going to think I'm cool. They're
Yeah.
going to think I'm in the loop. I'm in the know.
Sure.
Plus, I think the other thing that factors into that, and resellers have damaged this market hugely, in my opinion, but $250 for a pair of shoes that you're going to wear every single day and are probably going to last you at least a year, if not several years, is a completely different value proposition than $400 for a shirt I might wear twice a month, and it's not going to last me nearly as long. And so I think you reach a point of diminishing returns where you've tipped the scale so far that it becomes a tough purchase to make, versus accessible enough where if I save up for like the next month or 2 months,
Sure.
I can get myself a pair of Jordans, and that's going to be awesome. And everybody's going to love it. And so I think there is a scale there as well, as far as how far you can push that price before it feels unattainable. And as long as it feels attainable, people are willing to put in the effort and try to go achieve it. The second you cross that threshold, and it's, yeah, if I was making $1,000 an hour, I could get
Sure.
that.
Right.
That's no longer something people chase.
Okay.
And so I would say that's, again, purely speculation on my part, but I'd say that's probably where that balance falls in.
Okay. So as we wrap things up, you have the business. Tell people where they could find you. I'll link all the socials and stuff like that, but if they wanted to reach out to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah. So website is Stidham Dynamics, STIDHAM dynamics.com. That's probably the best place if you want to reach out to me. If you want to follow on social, I'm on Instagram, and it's at Stidham Dynamics as well as Facebook.
Okay.
So.
Awesome. So as we wrap up, like Austin, thank you for being a great guest. Like this was awesome. I'd love to have you back on maybe in like 6 months and kind of see where you're at and see how the social media thing is. And like we'll talk more about that because we didn't even get into networking. We didn't even get into all that stuff that was still on the table. So I would just love to see like your growth and perspective and how you have adjusted to this realm in a few months, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you so much for your time, guys. I will link all of Austin's stuff in the description of the video. I'm the One Fun Guy podcast. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.